Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're breaking down an absolutely monumental feat of production. We're talking about a staggering $3.5 million project where a massively popular deadly television phenomenon was recreated in real life. No CGI, no scripts for the contestants, just pure, unadulterated human reaction. The set builds were massive, the stakes were incredibly high, and let me tell you, the psychological pressure was 100% real. So, it immediately begs the question, right? How do you actually recreate the intense, heart-pounding psychological stakes of a survival show where, in the original fiction, the losers pay with their lives? How do you capture that exact same dread and desperation without putting anyone in actual danger? Well, the answer lies in brilliant game design, massive cash incentives, and a few really clever psychological tricks that we're going to unpack for you today. Okay, let's dive right into this by looking at the sheer scale of the operation. 456. That is the number of real, everyday people who walked onto the set, all fighting for a life-changing grand prize of $456,000. Just imagine that for a second. Standing in a huge room with 455 other people, knowing that only one of you is walking out with almost $500,000. The tension was just palpable before the first game even kicked off. And then, boom. Welcome to Red Light, Green Light, the brutal reality of the very first cut. To simulate the danger of the show, every single player had a device strapped to their chest that literally popped if they were caught moving. They had exactly 30 minutes to cross this massive room, and the panic was totally real. People were dropping left and right. The host even threw in a diabolical yellow light just to mess with their heads. By the time that clock hit zero, the field was completely decimated. We went from 456 hopefuls down to just 232. Almost half the field wiped out in a single game. From there, the survivors were thrown straight into the honeycomb challenge. The rules here were agonizingly simple. You pick a shape on a wall without knowing what it means. You get a cookie with that shape stamped into it, and you have to use a tiny little needle to carve it out in under 10 minutes. If your cookie breaks, your device pops and you're out. The psychological dread here was just off the charts, especially for the poor souls who realized they'd blindly chosen the ridiculously difficult umbrella shape. Get this, one player even secretly brought a lighter to try and melt the sugar. It perfectly captures that raw, desperate survival instinct. Now, right after the honeycomb game, production threw a fascinating psychological curveball. With 142 players left, they offered a test of pure temptation. Anyone willing to walk away right then and there would get a guaranteed $4,000 in cash. It was such a brilliant way to weed out players who maybe lacked absolute conviction. Because let's be honest, for a lot of folks, taking a guaranteed $4,000 is a lot smarter than fighting over 100 other people for just a chance at more. And yeah, many took the cash and walked. Once the field was thinned down to exactly 120 players, it was time for tug of war. The remaining competitors had to form groups of 10, completely unaware of what the game was even going to be. Once the 12 teams were locked in, they faced off on these towering platforms. The mechanics were brutal. You either pull the rope across the center line or your entire team loses their footing and plummets into a giant foam pit. It was just a chaotic, deeply physical battle for survival. In fact, one matchup went so incredibly hard that the teams literally broke the set. Now, to really ratchet up the emotional stakes for Game 4, Marbles, the producers pulled a devastating twist. The players were told to pair up. But instead of letting them choose freely, the producers actually used background data to purposefully pair players against their actual best friends and roommates. It was heartbreaking. They were handed bags of 20 marbles and told to play any game they wanted, but only the winner would advance. As one player agonizingly realized out loud, they had to go home to the same house at the end of the day, no matter who won. The micro-narratives that emerged during this marbles game were just incredible. You had friends flipping a single coin to decide who would walk away with a chance at $500,000. Other pairs made up these elaborate games, throwing marbles against a brick wall. But honestly, it was the dialogue that really hit home. Hearing friends say things like, "You promise to remember me?" before eliminating their buddy, or sharing an "I love you, man" before the clock ran out. Wow. It proved you absolutely do not need real life or death stakes to create profound human drama. The money and the betrayal was more than enough. After the total emotional ringer of marbles, production replaced the violent nighttime brawl from the original show with a high-stakes game of Dokji, which was actually sponsored by the mobile game Brawl Stars. The goal? Throw a folded blue paper to flip over a red square on the floor. And playfully enough, that deep blue perfectly matches the ceiling all those eliminated players were left staring at from inside their prop coffins. Either way, the pressure in the room was immense. And why was the pressure so immense? Well, because out of the remaining crowd tossing those blue squares, there was a hard cap on victories. Only the first 16 players to successfully flip their red square were allowed to move on. Literally everyone else, regardless of how far they had fought to make it, was instantly eliminated. This ruthless elimination set the stage for what is arguably the most terrifying challenge yet, the glass bridge. The 16 survivors had to pick from a room of mannequins bearing numbers in Korean, which determined their jump order. They then faced this massive bridge with two parallel platforms. One step holds your weight, the other drops you straight down into a deep foam pit. It was a pure 50-50 guessing game of luck, requiring absolute leaps of faith, while the clock is just relentlessly ticking down. The glass bridge produced one of the absolute most fascinating psychological moments of the entire production. The sheer terror of jumping into the unknown caused total gridlock. Players in the back refused to step up, and players in the front refused to blindly guess. And because of this intense paralysis, the clock actually hit 0. Players 16, 8, 13, and 5 were caught standing on the platforms when the time expired, and they were immediately eliminated just for their indecision. The pressure literally froze them in place. The ruthless math of this whole competition is just staggering. Take a look at this attrition rate. We started with 456 hopefuls. Red light, green light halved the field right away. Honeycomb chipped away another huge chunk. Tug of war and marbles systematically cut the remaining players by exactly 50% each time. By the end of the glass bridge, out of the initial 456, we were left with a top 6. That funnel was incredibly unforgiving. To celebrate making it to the end, the final 6 were treated to a lavish steak dinner. But the tone here was wonderfully different from the original source material. In the fictional show, this dinner is fraught with gritty life-or-death tension, and it ends with players stealing real knives to murder each other in the night. But in this recreation, the knives were plastic, the spirits were super high, and the competitors were actually happily talking about donating portions of their potential winnings to charity, like Team C's. It was a really great reminder of the underlying humanity in this massive game. But of course, that warm feeling couldn't last forever. The ultimate question remained: how do you recreate the final Squid Game? The defining feature of the fictional show's final round is a very specific Korean schoolyard game. But here, the players admitted they didn't actually know the rules to it. And you can't have a high-stakes finale if the players don't even know how to play, right? Production needed a universal game that everyone understood intuitively, but one that still carried immense anxiety-inducing tension. And they delivered an absolute punchline of a finale: musical chairs. No, seriously, but this wasn't your casual backyard party game. This was a nerve-wracking, high-stakes battle. They brought out a blindfolded referee just so there could be zero bias who controlled the ominous music. The final players had to constantly keep moving around an ever-shrinking number of chairs. If you hovered, you were warned. If you anticipated the music stopping and sat down too early, pop. Your device went off and you were marched straight into a coffin. The tension during that final rotation of musical chairs was agonizing to watch. Ultimately, one player managed to secure the very last chair, leaving the runner-up eliminated in the most devastating way possible, literally 1 single second away from $500,000. But in a fantastic show of sportsmanship, as the runner-up was lamenting his loss, he was completely surprised with a $10,000 consolation prize just for making it to second place. So the crucial point is celebrating our ultimate victor, Player 079. Out of 456 people, after surviving red light, green light, delicately carving a sugar cookie, pulling his heart out in tug of war, outlasting his friends in marbles, flipping that dokji square, braving the terrifying glass bridge, and dominating musical chairs, Player 079 claimed the $456,000 grand prize. It was an absolute masterclass in surviving an intense funnel of physical and psychological hurdles. This entire production really goes to show that you do not need real peril to study human nature. You just need the right incentives and a brilliantly designed game. And it leaves us with a fascinating thought to ponder. If you were standing in a room with 455 other people, knowing your entire financial future was on the line, what simple childhood game would you confidently bet $456,000 that you could win? Think about it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you next time.